he's a motivational speaker, Tony Robbins. He's been around for decades and decades. You've seen him in all kinds of different movies. But Tony Robbins, he is so moving. Well, think like Tony Robbins in 1776. Hey, welcome back to Luso, a show about our great country and the God stories from the American Revolution, or 1776. And as I'm saying, 1776, I'm of course raising my coffee cup as a cheers to 1776. Because, in case you haven't been paying attention, it's been in the news. I don't know if you've seen this in the news, but next year is our nation's 250th anniversary. So that's what we're here talking about. Before we get to the celebration, that's why we get this cake here. Because, you know, milestones in life, we always celebrate with cake and ice cream. We used to have some ice cream here too. Cake, ice cream, and whipped cream. But before we get to all of that, we've got to look back and see what was happening in 1770. Like, really, what was going on? Like, how do we even get here? How is it that we have this great country? You know? Like, how do we get here? And here's the crazy thing. There's a phenomenal book called 1776. I keep bringing this up in our show because this book is an award-winning book in Hollywood, HBO in particular. They've had the film rights for 20 years. Still haven't made it. 20 years. How hard is it to make a miniseries? They did the John Adams series. Why can't they do this? Was there something about a family they don't want to talk about? Well, hey, that's what we're here. We are here talking about it. So, matter of fact, I would dare say that this might be the only place on the internet that's actually unpacking what happened in 1776 and look at our nation's 250th anniversary. I don't know if there's anybody else. Let me know. Let me know in the comments if there's another podcast or other that's talking about the God stories from 1776. You just let me know. But a little shameless plug on my book that I wrote about my ancestor, Peter Francisco, who was famous, legendary, multiple monuments up and down the East Coast in his honor. The word Luso just means a badass warrior from the American Revolution. All right, just remember that. Rambo, think of Rambo, badass warrior from Vietnam. Luso, badass warrior from the American Revolution. All right, so keep that in mind. Remember that. We're not going to talk about Peter Francisco today. We're going to talk about something else. Now, you have seen this guy, Tony Robbins, in movies. Maybe you've even gone to one of his epic speeches where he's a motivational speaker. Tony Robbins. He's been around for decades and decades. You've seen him in all kinds of different movies. But Tony Robbins, he is so moving that when you hear him give a speech, you just like compelled to do whatever he's talking about. Like he is just so, I mean, if you've heard him give a speech, you just feel like invigorated. Like, man, I could run through a brick wall right now. He could be talking about underwater basket weaving, like anything, like, you know, how to put a basket together and fill it with cherries. And you'd be like, yes, I can do that today. I know I have the skill set. Like that. Tony Robbins is just so moving with his words that he knows how. It's incredible, which is why he's known as the #1 motivational speaker in the world. I mean, he is extraordinary. 6'6", tall guy, you know, so he kind of stands out. You look at him and you hear him and you're just like compelled. Well, think like Tony Robbins in 1776. Well, actually, let's go back a year, 1775. March of 1775, we have a very, very famous speech, which if you're an American, you've probably heard this story of Patrick Henry. And he delivers this famous speech of give me liberty or give me death, right? You probably heard that. Like if you don't remember a lot of history and a lot about the American Revolution, you probably remember that piece. You're like, okay, yeah, Patrick Henry. That sounds familiar. I think I heard of that guy before. Oh, yes. Give me liberty, give me death. Yes. Well, historians look at his, quote, his famous speech that you may or may not be familiar with as one of the most moving and instrumental, critical moments in our nation's history. So, you know, yesterday we were unpacking George Washington and him becoming the general. Well, then you have this other player, Patrick Henry, who is very critical. He was the first governor of Virginia. He was actually, presiding over Virginia. And when the debate of whether or not we should take up arms and fight or become, stay loyal to the king or take up arms and fight, he's, right in the middle of that there in Virginia. Now, again, if you know a little bit of American history, you actually know the Boston Massacre that took place up in Massachusetts, so that's way up in the north. And the early battles, Bunker Hill and those types of battles, that was all going on up north. But it was really critical for our country to actually have Virginia, which was really seen as the most influential state at the time in these new colonies. And if Virginia had been like, whatever, hey, you guys, sucks to be you up there in Massachusetts, so sorry, deal with it. If that had taken place, we might not have this great country. But what's going on here in March of 1775, which, by the way, my ancestor was there at that moment in time. I've been to St. John's Church in Richmond, Virginia. It's the Second Virginia Convention that's taking place where they're actually arguing over whether or not we should stay loyal to the king, like I said, or should we take up arms and fight? So I've been there. I actually filmed a documentary there with the History Channel, and you can go there today and see. I was just there not too long ago with my son, and you can see how pivotal that moment in history was for this great country. Well, so this famous speech, what's crazy is Patrick Henry didn't have any notes. He spoke for hours. And afterwards, people said it was as if there was a spiritual component to it that just, they felt so moved. And mind you, again, there was a good majority of Virginians and frankly, up and down the East Coast, of those that just wanted to stay loyal. They were called loyalists or Tories. They wanted to stay loyal to the king. Like, hey, why are we thinking about taking up arms and fighting? And here's what's going on. I don't know if you know this, but March 1775, the Second Virginia Convention, what they know is all of their ammunitions and their gunpowder and everything has been locked up in a church in Williamsburg. So not too far away from Richmond. Here they are at St. John's Church. And there's room for about 120 people inside the church, but there's a lot of other people gathered around outside the church listening in. My ancestor, Peter Francisco, he's kind of a slave at this time in his life. And so he's there on the outside, not on the inside. He wasn't any kind of aristocrat, my ancestor. He was a slave, okay? We'll get to him later. But Peter Francisco is listening in, and listening to Patrick Henry's speech changed his life, which ultimately affected me and my life. But here we have Patrick Henry giving this famous speech of give me liberty or give me death. But what he's referencing is, look, the British Army is coming. They have locked up all of our gunpowder, all of our guns. They've taken our guns. They've confiscated and they've locked it up in Williamsburg. So look, I don't know about you, but the army is coming, and they're coming in hundreds and hundreds of ships. It's just, they're coming, and the fact that we're even here talking about staying loyal to the king or taking up arms and fighting, the fact that we're having this discussion, they're coming after you and me. And that's when he says, but how about you? For me, give me liberty or give me death. That famous speech radically changed things. And the eyewitness accounts were that it was so moving that he talks about the liberty that we have as man, as a human being. And the fact is that maybe liberty wouldn't become such a central point in the discussion of the American Revolution and even the identity that we have as Americans today. 250 years later, liberty is at the core central piece of who we are as Americans. And it really comes from this famous speech that Patrick Henry gave. Frankly, that's a God story. In my opinion, you look at that and you go, how is it that this young guy, he was young, could give an amazing speech that moved the hearts of people, and he didn't even have notes, but he was a Tony Robbins of his day that impacted your life and my life. Well, hey, tune in tomorrow, and we'll talk to you. We'll talk about the fourth God story from the American Revolution. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Hit subscribe below, but more than that, click the link below, luso.tv. Watch our short film. That's how you can really help us. Together, you and I, together, we can educate 83% of Americans that don't understand why we fought the American Revolution.
but I need your help. We need your help. So share it with your friends. Pay it forward. Send it to 1,000 of your friends. Okay, maybe 100, 10 of your friends. Pay it forward. Click the link, luso.tv.